This show is supported by Twin Cities Eye Consultants. No matter your seat at the match, Twin Cities Eye Consultants will make sure you can see your favorite players. Book your next eye exam 24/7 at tcecmn.com. Welcome in, Loons fans, to another edition of the Matchday Preview presented by Twin Cities Eye Consultants. Jonathan Harrison here, joined once again by Manny Lagos. Manny, how are you doing today on an episode that is highly anticipated? I know that many people reading the name that is joining us are excited to hear what he has to say about our team.
I'm excited because it's nice to have a conference away win. Mm-hmm. Get to talk about it, get to talk soccer outside of Minnesota United area. And then to have a guest like today gets me excited because I know it's going to be a good show. Awesome writer, awesome, and speaker of soccer, all things sports. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to having you on. Matt Doyle from Tactics Free Zone. Go subscribe to his newsletter over there. Soccer Wise podcasting over there with everybody over there, David Goss, and love listening to that Monday recap every week. David or Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. We really missed doing the Monday recap when the league canceled extra time ahead of last year, and then obviously things with my job situation changed. So as soon as that happened, I was like, all right. I called Goss, and we're like, every Monday 10 a.m. man, we have to do it because the league, like, I don't know how else you follow the league. I don't know why, like in this era where podcasts are ubiquitous and essential, I don't know why there was the decision made to crush extra time, but it ended up freeing me up to rejoin David. And, Tom, once his infinite paternity leave finally ends and you get back to it. I think it's going to be a good show. Those Monday shows, the three of us, I think will end up being, I hope, a touch point for the league fan base as a whole.
Absolutely. It's something
I think it's massively important. You look at the parity of this league and you look at the storytelling, it still is really on a league level, kind of star driven. And there's just so many stories, whether it's a tactical side, the club identity starting to evolve in a way that they never have before, which feels very regional. It feels very local, but it also kind of combines, I think, where the sport is with MLS now, which is it's got so many more nuances that I think not just the big soccer fan, but I think the mainstream soccer fan, if they want to get into the sport, there's no better way to listen to your show, Matt, because again, it gets people really excited about just how hard it is to run a team, to run a club, to win games, to build rosters, to deal with adversity. So, make sure people tune in and listen for sure.
That's a nice compliment, Manny. I appreciate that a lot.
Of course. It's something. Extra time was something that was on my daily listening or my weekly listening to list every week as I prepared for broadcasts, as I prepared for games. So it's something I missed. And I'm glad that you guys are back doing it on Soccer Wise. And it's been fun to listen to you guys get back together again. Let's jump into it. We've got plenty to discuss across Major League Soccer. We'll start there. We'll get to Minnesota United at the end. But I want to start off with the most MLS After Dark game that was not in MLS After Dark. Colorado 2, Toronto 3, a handful of yellow card or a bunch of yellow cards, a handful of red cards. This game was all over the place, Matt. And I know Colorado's been a fun team to watch this year. Borderline aggressive, pretty. They get after it a little bit, but they've been fun to watch. Toronto seems to be coming to life now with Josh Sargent scoring his game winner late in that game. What were your thoughts on this one? This one was a really fun one to kick off the day.
Yeah, for 50 minutes, it was a really, really good game before it just went completely off the rails and became, as you said, MLS After Dark afternoon edition. So one of the things I like most in covering the league and in any league, right? I'm a huge NBA fan, and I like watching the way teams progress throughout the year and get better and address the things where they're deficient, or, try to get a young player to make that next step. And to see it happening already for both of these teams, well, like, that's why I was having so much fun watching this game, because Colorado came out, new head coach. You don't know how he's going to play, but he's English, so I expected the worst, to be honest with you. And he's not like they want to go out there and they hold the ball. They use the ball to rip teams apart, and you could see it right off the kickoff in the second half. And Colorado's playing 10v11 at this point. They hold the ball for like 60 seconds, knocking it back and forth, sort of probing and trying to drag Toronto upfield, and then they finally do. And once they have that, they're able to play 2 or 3 quick passes and get in behind. And it was just good soccer. And that's how they drew the red card. And that's how they got, scored their first goal, made it 1-1, made it 10v10. And as I said, it went off the rails after that. But it was like, okay, that is real progress from the Rapids. And on the flip side, like I spent the first month of the year really expecting Toronto to be kind of a nothing. And they added Josh Sargent, and he's a good player, but to me, he's not a $20 million striker, man. But even, whether he's worth that or not, he has been kind of a skeleton key over the past, game and a half, where because he's so effective dropping in from that number 9 into the half spaces, they suddenly have access to these sort of third line passes, 2 feet in the pockets, that then turn into quick combo play and release the wingers in, high leverage situations on the move. And that is something that they weren't, like, they were just, very slowly and methodically swinging the ball from one side to the other, and very easy to defend. And suddenly they're a team that's not that easy to defend anymore. So to see both those things happening at once, and then you get the final 40 minutes, which is a dose of pure uncut MLS. It was a really, really good and entertaining game.
Manny, that was...
I mean, my first thoughts, unfortunately, went to Matt's fandom of NBA and progression of teams and seasons, and how I wish the Timberwolves would have been progressing better into this playoff picture. But
you've got Io. I think Io changes that team, right? Makes some more changes in the open court. So
no, we have a chance to make a run in the playoffs. We definitely have not built on maybe 2 conference finals in the last 2 years. So, but we'll see. We're at the end of the day, Matt, what you said was right. I wish we'd progress a little more, but it's a good West. So back to the game itself. My brain just goes to the stress of Toronto having a $20+ million player, hadn't scored yet, and he's got to take time to get fit and to get into Robin's system. I think there clearly is improvement last year, but now when you put that big of an acquisition, you just never know. And then the next thing you know, they're kind of getting worked in that game. And Colorado looks solid, and then just chaos breaks out. And obviously, I think that the goalkeeping was a big issue for Colorado in that game. I mean, obviously, the one just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm still trying to figure out if he was trying to control with his thigh, with the outside of his foot. Like, it was a really weird moment, but it created great chaos. And like you guys said, I think Colorado has decided they're going to try to start out on the front foot and kind of use some of that energy, youthful energy, to get forward. It does make me feel like they're still going to be searching for that balance. If I'm being honest, I think there's good teams that they're about to play. I think the win at home against the Galaxy was maybe a little bit lucky to get the red card. And the next thing you know, the Galaxy maybe is not in as good a moment as we all thought they might be at the start of the season. So, wild stuff. But the goalkeeping was the story of the game for me.
Yeah, I mean, the goalkeeping on both sides left a lot to be desired. And it's going to be difficult for the Rapids to be the team they want to be if this is the version of Zach Steffen that they get.
Yeah.
And last year's version of Zach Steffen was goalkeeper of the year caliber. He just didn't play enough minutes. But that was kind of the outlier. If you look at the arc of his career, especially over the last 5 years, he has not been consistent either in terms of what he does with the ball in build out, or in terms of shot stopping. And that's a concern. But one of the things that we've seen so far, real quick from Matt Wells is he's not afraid to drop or outright cut anybody. Like Sam Vines was 3 years ago, a national team guy, and now they just released him. They sold Cole Bassett, who looked like he was going to be the heart and soul of this team for 10 years. I don't love that. Those are both homegrown guys, and you'd like to see the homegrown guys be the heart and soul of the team for 10 years, but the Rapids weren't going anywhere, right? They needed some sort of cultural reset. And I'm not like it's not like I'm all in on what they've done so far, but it does seem to be directionally correct very early on. And that kind of feels like the Rapids fans I know are all considering it a win. So far, so good.
So far, so good, Jonathan. I'm going to segue. If there's a team that we're talking about in the West that I think is throwing a little bit of the easy one is San Jose, but I think the sneaky one is Dallas right now, personally.
Yeah. That was the next game I was going to go to, is because they continue to impress. It was a 4-0 win over DC United at the weekend. Logan Farrington, Peter Musa continued to score up top for Dallas. They continue to just kind of evolve into this team that seems to be really good in the Western Conference. Doyle, where do you stand on Dallas? Are they for real? Is this a team that's going to compete near the top of the Western Conference like they seem to be able to at this moment?
So I think they will be a very good playoff team. I don't think they're at the level of the Sounders, the Caps, LAFC. They might catch San Diego, because I think San Diego had a little bit too much of a heat check this winter and not adding high quality attacking pieces or a little bit more backline depth, stuff like that. But they're in that second tier, Dallas are. And it's because guys like Musa have developed and they've done a good job of adding pieces in midfield, and they're starting to reopen that academy pipeline a little bit. And the combination up top of Musa and Farrington, because those guys are so good playing off of each other and so good playing against the ball, Dallas can generate chances in different ways than a lot of other teams, right? It's like very throwback to have two big center forwards. Of course, Musa is that classic number 9. Farrington is a little bit more of a float around and do anything. So it kind of works together. In order to take that next step, they need to add the playmaker. We've all seen a 3-5-2 work in this league. I mean, you go back 30 years when Manny was playing, half the teams were playing a 3-5-2 with that traditional number 10 pulling the strings, and they don't have that. I thought it was the easiest add, right? It was like the clearest thing. You go into the offseason this year saying, well, here's what this team needs, here's what this team needs. And, and I will write that column every time because everybody clicks that damn column. And it was the easiest one was Dallas saying like, hey, they took a shot with Lucho Acosta. It didn't work out, but they need a Lucho Acosta type, and they obviously know it. And then they didn't get one. And I don't understand exactly why. Maybe it's just they thought those guys would be available and cheaper in the summer. But even without that, they're clearly better than they were last year. I think Eric Quill is making it obvious he's really a pretty good coach. And at this point, 5th, 6th in the West, around where RSL are, around where Colorado might be, maybe the same place that San Jose will be, but San Jose has been even better, because they have that number 10. And for San Jose, it's a kid they developed internally in Nico Chakiris, and those guys are difference makers in MLS.
Yeah, San Jose have also been really impressive, as you said, Doyle. Manny, they got a 3-0 win over San Diego. We'll talk about San Diego a little bit later on in the show as we preview that game coming up this weekend for the Loons. But San Jose, a big 3-0 win. I know San Diego got another red card, which seems to be kind of their favorite thing to do in games at this point in the season. But San Jose just kind of continues to impress and continues to build, especially with the youth, as Doyle pointed out.
Yeah, I think my theme is going to be defense. 1 goal given up. That's it. I think, again, I brought up the Dallas a little bit different than Colorado because I do think Eric Quill is not thinking as much about the number 10 as much as about what's my defensive structure around 2 very unique, big goal-scoring forwards. Although, like Matt said, Farrington, I think, has a little bit more variety. He could play out wide. He could play a couple different positions. But that is unique, that tandem. And so for me, I'm intrigued because, it's like when Benteke came in the league. I was intrigued. We didn't have a lot of big forwards that just crushed guys within the box with headers. So I think there's something there. And looking at Eric Quill not going with a 10 or wanting defensive focus first, to me is where the West really is right now. I mean, you look at LAFC and they've obviously broke out offensively these last 2 games, but the first 5 or 6 games was all about their defensive shape and making sure that they were going to have an identity that was said, hey, you're going to have a tough time scoring against us. And, oh, by the way, we've got amazing attackers. I think Bruce, saw last year's experiment with Martinez and Chicho that it just didn't work. There's just not enough defenders in the field. So I think he's now got a better balance, and he's really focused on let's shore that up. And now we've got Chiqueras, who looks hungry to get all over the field and crush balls, and really, Werner wasn't in there, but now you got speed. You've got some nice confidence going. I just, again, I think we're in that conversation too. Like, where's our final identity? But certainly, there's certain teams here that aren't at the elite. I do think Matt's right. I think LAFC and Vancouver really are at the elite. I probably would have said 2 weeks ago San Diego was in there. They've got a big matchup against us this weekend to see where they're at. We get to see where we're at, so I'm excited about that. But ultimately, I do think San Jose is one of the stories of the year. There's no doubt about it. Partly because it's Bruce Arena, but partly it's 1 goal given up so far this season. The LAFC is the only better team in the goals against now.
And let me just make this point before we move on. Bruce has actually talked about it, saying that we were too easy to build against last year. He said he made the point after this weekend's win, the 3-0 against San Diego. He's like, it's a defensive improvement from everyone. Don't just focus on the back line. And he didn't specifically shout out Preston Judd, but like the Quakes are the ultimate example of your first attacker is your first defender. The way they close down now and force bad passes out of the back, or at least non-penetrative passes out of the back, makes them so much better than when they had more talented players playing center forward last year. Because let's face it, Preston Judd's a good player. He's not Joseph Martinez in front of goal. He's never going to be that. But as a collective, they're a better team because Preston Judd works so hard against the ball and takes so much away from other, back lines in terms of how they can build into the midfield. And that means the midfield and a back line is spending much less time scrambling this year. For San Jose.
So Matt, a little bit like it could be like a Brian White. I know they're a little bit different in how they play, but a similar kind of contribution, both goal and energy and effort for sure.
Yeah, and the opposite of that this year is Cincinnati, right? Because none of their attackers defend, and they're completely lost against the ball. And even though they have, I think on paper, more talent than 95% of the teams in MLS, they are just going down like a stone because they can't stop teams from just walking straight into central midfield.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting start to the season, and that's been topped off by another incredible performance. LAFC 6, Orlando 0. Kind of two different teams going in completely different directions. This one, especially when you look at what they did last night in CONCACAF Champions Cup action, Doyle, LAFC continue to be the class of the league, I dare say.
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple games in March where they were really frustrating to me because they couldn't decide whether they wanted to be a counterattacking team or a possession team. And Mark Dos Santos, the head coach, was kind of running Denny Bouanga and Son Heung-min and Mark Delgado into the ground. And I include Mark Delgado in that statement because he continues to be the most underrated player in the league. Like, he is irreplaceable for that team. And if you don't value him properly, you end up looking like the 2025 LA Galaxy, who, remember, let him go ahead of last season. That was a really bad move. So I think he kind of had a come to Jesus moment during the international break. He said, look, at this point in the season with the personnel we have, we're a little smarter to set up a little lower and play against the ball. And as the year goes on, I think they will try to be more expansive, especially, once they get all their pieces in midfield back. But for now, if you can play on the break with Son and Boanga and David Martinez and Nathan Ordaz, you're probably going to be pretty tough to stop. And it's now 9-0 over the last 2 games. Like, that's not a bad run from those guys.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and look, 6-0 against Orlando. I wrote it in my column this weekend. Orlando's so bad that it's like buyer beware with anything. Trying to take anything out of that game other than like, hey, it's nice to get 3 points. Cruz Azul's not bad. Cruz Azul's really, really good, and to drop a 3-0 on them is a massive statement.
Yeah, I what was interesting about last night I felt like they were doing what you were talking about, Matt, for the season of their how to expand to become good and they'll have more of the ball more. They did it against Cruz Azul because Cruz Azul quickly realized we can't make this expansive. Like, there's too much attack and there's too much gaps. So that first 15 or 20 minutes, they had one good chance and they had the ball a ton. But the moment LAFC said, we're going to start counterattacking, it blew them for a loop. They're like, we can't send numbers forward. And then they lost Cruz Azul, which has been such a good team for the last couple of days. They had no identity about how they were going to break LAFC down. And by the second half, I think LAFC could keep the ball now if they wanted to. They didn't always want to, but they could. And so there is a playbook here where, unfortunately, if you're in the West, it looks like they're only going to get better based on the threats they have, and especially with Martinez now being, I'll run even more for Song and Boanga because he's just young and full of energy. So it was, I feel like, early on scary good soccer, especially when you just don't give up goals. I mean, and you have that kind of attacking prowess. That's an impressive balance on offense and defense.
Yeah, and the fact that they've been able, like Marc Dos Santos, even if he does nothing else this year, the fact that he's been able to get this out of David Martinez means he's done a really good coaching job in at least one of the major ways they needed him to do a really good coaching job.
All right, fun question for both of you real quick. If you were going to value him to a European market, 20 million? 10 million? He's 20. So usually that goes higher, right? Usually you pay.
I'd want to see a full season of it before I go that high.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to have some fun with it.
There's been a couple seasons where you expected a lot more out of him and he just didn't produce. And now he is finally producing like the talent they expected when they brought him in. So I'd want to see a full season before, if I'm a European club, before I'm going that high on.
All right. So go flip it. If you're the Galaxy, the LAFC, like what would you put a price tag on for him?
So LAFC is a team that doesn't necessarily need to sell, right? And that's the confounding factor when talking about MLS teams selling players overseas. Like if it was an Argentinian team or a Brazilian team, even, they would take the offer, right? LAFC, they're in the black, man. They're doing okay for themselves, and they don't need to sell unless it's a walkaway price. And to me, 12 million. I think if they got that, they would be like, okay, yeah, we could do that. We know how to replace this guy if we have that much money in the bank. But then the question is, he helps them right now win trophies, and they have trophies to win. And I'm using the plural, for a reason. Is that worth $12 million? Think of it in Sounders terms last year, right? They said no to $10 million for Obed Vargas in the summer because they had trophies to win. Now they only got one, but the gate alone from that final against Inter Miami was worth probably about $10 million. And then they sold him for another $3 million
where was
after
that
the season. I think it was actually to Atleti. I think so it hasn't been fully reported out, but my understanding is that they had the $10 million offer was from Atleti last year after they played in the Club World Cup.
Go ahead.
Just by holding on to the good young player longer, they ended up making more money in the long run and winning a trophy than if they had taken the highest transfer offer the moment it came in.
100%. I agree. The only thing I would say, because we just went through it, And you can't survive turning down too many offers from Champions League teams. I don't care who you are in MLS.
Yeah.
If it's a young player, not an older player, that's different, because you can kind of convince them this is maybe your last big contract. We'll just give you the money. But I think a younger player, the locker room you'll lose it eventually and because that's their dream still. I mean, as much as I want to make sure even LAFC, they can pay as much as they want. If you got a young kid who's going to like a Champions League team, you can maybe get away with it. And that's why we have the schedule flip, which will be a positive, because now there won't be these questions in the middle of the summertime. They'll be in the off season, which will be easier for a club to kind of justify it. But I do think if it's a Champions League team still, it's hard to turn down. Like if you turn it down once, you might have to do it 6 months later. That's all.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. As much as I want to continue talking about MLS as a whole, because it's fun to do with you, Matt, I want to get your thoughts on Minnesota United. I think it's fair to say you weren't the biggest fan of their tactics and play style last year. What have you thought about how they've evolved this season?
Well, so part of that was a bit, right? I respected what Eric Ramsey did in terms of the defensive structure and in terms of maximizing the long throws and set pieces, because it was a recipe to mid 50s points in a playoff appearance. I just don't believe that style of play can ever be more than that in MLS. And we have a long history in this league of counterattacking teams doing well in the regular season and then fizzling out in the playoffs. And it's become even more pronounced over the past 5 years as a correlation between possession and points per game becomes undeniable. And I think the evolution that we've seen this year has been in that direction. Fewer long balls, fewer switches of play, more trying to build with the ball, even in, the aftermath of that disaster against Vancouver over the past 2 weeks. I think Minnesota has still shown willingness to be a little more patient, to be a little more daring in terms of trying to draw the opponents upfield before playing through them. I'm not saying that they're Wilfred Nancy's Columbus Crew, but I do think that there's an understanding that guys like Joaquin Pereira and Triantis and honestly Kelvin Yeboah are all better served by playing this style of game rather than kind of the boom ball that they were resigned to last year. And I think you saw, frankly, I think you saw in the body language down the stretch last year that maybe it had worn itself out within the squad.
Yeah, I think that's fair. You speaking of Kelvin Yeboah and how he's kind of played and seems like a rejuvenated player this season as opposed to what he was struggling through at the end of last year. I know there was injuries there as well, but that's a guy, especially when you watch the second half against the Galaxy, just plays a little bit more confidently from what I'm seeing body language wise than what he was last year. And that can only be good things for Minnesota to have that guy up top as the number 9, who's confident and is scoring goals and is getting into really dangerous spots like he was against the Galaxy.
One of the things that Matt just brought up, which I love, is we talked about how important his show was for a decade, or I'm not sure how long it was, just getting more complex discussion of soccer and not dumbing it down to try to get fan bases going. And I bring this up because we need Matt to be like, I hate Minnesota style last year. Well, then it's a why. And it's because it was like Catenaccio on steroids. It was insane in a way that like the league hadn't seen it, but it was also fun in a way that if you're a really big soccer geek, that discipline for 90 minutes that Eric Ramsey created is actually really hard to create. And it was pretty impressive that he got guys for almost the whole year to embrace 75 minutes of defensive shape at the top of your box. I mean, that's you're going back like Italian soccer, 80s, 90s, like just an identity. And I think Matt's right. We publicly said we don't think that's sustainable in a league of parity. Where you can go and get players that can be a little more balanced and win and try to figure out a better identity. But I will say it's still part of Minnesota, and it has to be because we'll never get the biggest stars like LAFC. So somehow I think last year was an important transition for this is still going to be our identity. We have to sign players that are hungry to defend, to get down low, individually, collectively, deal with some of the superstars of this league. where it flips now. And then I'm excited because we kind of saw the Galaxy, which is maybe a one-off and it was away, but that was the first time in maybe a year and a half where we actually had a middle press line. We actually won the ball and guys got hungry to make good decisions, not just to counterattack, but to maybe hurt LA or the Galaxy by making them run a little bit and making their midfield expose that they're not where they need to be to really compete at the highest level either. So long story short, I love Matt's criticism last year. I think it's awesome. I mean, I've talked publicly about for our fans, if you aren't like into defending 80s Italian soccer, it was a tough watch for our fan base and they stuck with us. So I brag about our fan base because they actually still show up at our games when it's maybe not the easiest on the eye if you want more balanced soccer. So long story short, I'm going back to the game this week, and Matt, I love that Matt criticized. I think it's part of the sport and part of like how do you get better from that. But ultimately, I think it is part of our own personal club identity growth and important last year. And I think it's pretty cool that we're publicly talking about how we're trying to get a higher line. And we're a little bit nervous about how to do it and what our identity is going to be. And I think we've kind of acknowledged that. And that's a little bit why Hamas is on the roster. That's a little bit like why I'm saying I'm not quite sure how we're going to get there. But we know we have to get there, but we can't lose our defensive identity. That's going to be part of this club no matter what, just based on the fact that we are not a big market.
Plus the long throws. Can't lose those either.
Well, it's interesting. Next year, they might have that rule where you only have 5 seconds. Is that right? To get the throw?
I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff bandied about, and you know that MLS is not hesitant to sign on to new experimental rules, which I don't necessarily love. I will say from a neutral's perspective, watching teams take a minute and a half to set up their long throws and set pieces is brutal, and I hate it. And there should be yellow cards given for that. To me, it's not even, you don't even need to have a new rule. Just enforce the current rules. Give the refs leeway to. I mean, the refs have leeway to just start yellow carding entire teams if they want to, and then they should.
I love it. Final thought, because I know we got to get you out of here. Who's impressed you on this team so far this season, and where do you see Minnesota United competing by the end of the season?
So Yeboah is the big one, because it was obvious when he first came into the league that he had so much talent, and that's a signing that I thought they got right from the jump. And then last year was such a disappointment. And I think that was a combination of, the system, which we've talked about, but also he was playing through injuries, right? He was hurt on and off throughout the entire year. And this year he looks healthy. He's also just playing unselfish in a way that, you're never sure if that's going to be there from a center forward. And I don't just mean passing, but also like he's making the types of runs that suggest he's not just running for himself, but he's trying to open up space underneath for Thomas Chancalay. And that was a really good acquisition as well, just to get him for essentially nothing. That's a really good way to leverage a position in the league. So I like those two guys together, along with Joaquin Pereira, who is one of my favorite players in the league to watch. Like suddenly that is, we have an attack that can be a little bit pretty and effective. And then suddenly Marcanic is, pushing up on the left wing, and there's width that everybody has to deal with now. So all of that in conjunction, and obviously, its apex so far was the second half against the Galaxy, which was so much fun. But that gives me confidence that as a whole, Cameron Knowles has kind of got this thing headed in the right direction, and he seems to want the things that I think he should want in his, but he's also, he's willing to throw stuff at the wall, and if it doesn't work out, he hasn't been precious about it. We're going to be a 4-2-3-1 team. Ooh, we lost 6-0. We're not going to be a 2-3-1 team at this point. So it's like, okay, that seems like a good coach. That seems like someone who, like maybe he's not going to be Pep Guardiola, but he can probably win some games, and have so far, despite the fact that I think Minnesota's probably played the toughest schedule in the league to this point. So I was like, okay, checking a lot of boxes.
I like it, Matt. I do think Kelvin has been much more selfless. I would say there was probably like a weird subconscious Tani doing so well and just like not being the number one man where he is now. So he's going to have to deal with that adversity this year now, the pressure of that, which will be interesting. But I think Joaquin Pereira is somebody for you to keep your eye on. He really has kind of taken the reins in terms of just, I think, in the locker room and on the field saying, hey, we're having tight moments now where we need to keep the ball or get a foul or a key pass. He's been great. And again, I think it'll be an interesting, lead up to the World Cup with James now, hopefully getting healthy and seeing how he just pushes us in a different direction and see if that actually gives us a spark as well.
Yeah. Doyle, it's been great having you. I know we got to get you out of here, so appreciate you stopping by and sharing your thoughts on the league and Minnesota United. Go subscribe to his work over at Tactics Free Zone, and then go listen to him weekly, Soccer Wise podcast, wherever you find your podcast on YouTube. Doyle, appreciate you stopping by. Thanks for.
Hopefully we can have you back. Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you back.
Anytime, boys. Really enjoyed this.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Loved it. Whether your kids are avid soccer players or new to the game, MNUFC's youth soccer camps have something for players of all ages and abilities. We have a range of options for boys and girls ages 6 through 16, and we'd love to see you here. Check out our camp offerings at mnufc.com/camps. All right, that was Matt Doyle. Appreciate having him on. Manny, let's jump into the preview section or the review section of this podcast. Looking back at this Galaxy win, Minnesota United 2, LA Galaxy 1. This was, I think, and we talked about the second half already, but I think that second half was maybe the best 45 minutes of soccer we've seen out of Minnesota United, not just this season, maybe in a little while here.
Yeah, I really liked in both halves the first 15 minutes, just how we dealt with their energy and them wanting to set a tone and pace. And we really, I thought, were the better team in terms of moving the ball, in terms of getting into dangerous spaces. Obviously, we didn't create a lot of dangerous chances, particularly in the first half, but we just had good soccer. We moved the ball well. We got the good patterns going forward. We got Joaquin the ball in the right spaces. Obviously, I think there's a good argument about maybe Owen Jean being sneakily the man of the match by just his connection and movement of the ball and just kind of being in the right place to break things up. For his first start of the year, I thought he had an outstanding game. I thought he was just really, really impressive. Chancalay with 2 assists, Calvin with a goal, the go-ahead goal where he got the ball wide and then got in the box where you want your center forward to do it. So Drake with a really couple big saves. Back line, not a lot to do, but when they were called upon, particularly in that kind of pressure moments the second half, I thought they really stood tall in box defending and far post defending.
Yeah, I think I want to go back to the point that you had the first 15 minutes. That was something that Dan and I talked on the broadcast, and then we've talked on the podcast here, is the starts of games haven't been always the greatest this season, and they really needed a hot start. And we saw it earlier in the day across the league, how teams came out flying after the international break and really put their opposition to the sword. And that's something that kind of made me nervous considering how this team has started in games this season. But they came out and they played really well in the first 15 or so minutes of this match. And that gave me confidence and kind of boosted a little bit I guess just confidence going through the rest of the game that, they got the start of the game figured out. Now they're going to continue to build on that. And they certainly did, especially in the second half, where it seems like they attacked on the front foot a little bit more. There was what, 11, 12 pass sequence to that first goal that ends up with Marcanic going up with the ball going up over the top to Marcanic and sliding it right past the goalkeeper. First of all, 11 to 12 pass sequence to get to that goal was something to behold, starting off at the back, Duncan taking the ball away, and then just slowly kind of baiting LA Galaxy towards the Minnesota net and then playing right through them, as we talked about with Doyle. That was a really fun sequence to watch on that first goal.
Oh, it was outstanding. I mean, I think if you're giving the whole team credit, because you got to create space, you got to make guys open, but really we were building up to get Joaquin the ball in good spots based on our possession, which we hadn't done a lot this year.
And he was dropping a lot deeper than we've seen him.
Yeah, he was. But the nice thing was he had Chancellay up there. Even Toronto started to slowly kind of load the line. So then you still have numbers forward. What I love about this goal is all that kind of little stuff that people maybe don't always see prior to Joaquin making that pass. But then the evidence of both how good the pass was and then how good the run was by Mark Anthony. Like, he ran across the line twice to make sure he stayed on side. Like, that is so hard. And I mean, it's hard to talk about an outside back making that kind of run and being that disciplined. And then once he was on his breakaway, his first touch was insanely calm and composed. And then his finish was like, no, I'm a number 9 sometimes. It was just really that good. Like, it really was. And he's almost scored like he acts like this is what I do. I score goals. Yeah. So outstanding. It was a great goal at a great moment in the game where I think we deserved. I think our play deserved to have the lead at that point.
Yeah, the Marcanic kind of making those runs feels like a natural evolution for him from what he did last season, where he kind of burst on the scene as that left wing back as kind of a special or a set piece kind of specialty there. And now he's obviously grown in confidence in what he's able to do on the field. And he's making those runs. We saw it against the Sounders where he made that run across the field and got the really good pass from Pereira deep inside the Minnesota half and almost was able to take it down and slide it past the Seattle keeper. Just, I think the final ball let him down a little bit there, but this time he kind of gets it all right. And as you said, that run was really good. You saw it as soon as Pereira gets that ball kind of at the halfway line, Marcanic starts making that run. You see, if you're not watching the ball, if you're watching him at the bottom of your screen, he starts making that run early and you can see, all right, I know I've got Pereira on the ball. I'm going to make this run because I know he can get it to me. So that was fun. I want to go back to Owen Jen. He was, as you said, he was probably should be one of the man of the match for Minnesota. He paired well with Triantis, who also deserves a shout coming back from international duty, getting slotted in as a starter. I don't imagine they wanted to start him in this match coming back from international duty, but because of Will Trapp's illness, Triantis comes in, plays the full 90, plays really well. But Owen Jen, just a standout performance from him, showing what he can do as a young 22-year-old who's got a ton of professional experience. Didn't get a whole lot of opportunity to showcase it last year, but man, he was just always in the right spot, making good passes. The thing I liked about him most in his passes is that he's always looking forward. It was never just kind of looking backwards, trying to just retain the ball to retain the ball's sake. He was always looking to progress the attack.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's one of those super cool things about your touches create time and space. I say that 1,000 times. I love saying it. But long story short is, like, he might still play 2 touches, but that first touch, he kind of looks up in a way that the Galaxy have to realize he might play forward. So they have to now either cheat and he plays forward and we break a line and we start moving forward, or they kind of tuck in. And now when he plays back to Romero or to Dugan, they actually have an extra time to actually take a touch and progress the ball themselves versus, if you don't do that, next thing you know, they're pressing, and it's going to Drake, and we now have to just kick it up and start battling for a second ball. So I think he really was hungry to just move the ball for us. He really was. And he and Trantis really showed some nice composure that I think unsettled the Galaxy. Again, you brought up those first 15 minutes to start. What I think is happened to a team like the Galaxy, who are a little bit uncertain about their own identity, you almost crave an easy day because you're going to put a lot of energy in early, hope you get a goal or two, and then you kind of figure out how you're going to solve the game. I just think both ends of each first half and second half, the Galaxy were let know by us that it was not going to be an easy home game for them. And I don't think they were excited about it. I think they had a midweek game, a big one tonight in Toluca. And I also think they're still trying to figure out how they're going to, take care of teams that actually, come to LA now and put a little pressure on them. So it was just a really, really comprehensive result for us, I thought. I thought on both sides of the ball, individually, collectively. Again, I think if you're looking over a 2-year arc of the balance of offense and defense, I think it was one of our better games we've had.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know the offense and how they played with the ball is going to get a little bit more of the attention, but you mentioned the defense, just outstanding on the night. There was the one moment where obviously Marco Royce gets a good ball into him, makes a good first touch, and kind of gets into some space for the equalizing goal there. But Minnesota responded a little bit later off of that. But overall, the back line for Minnesota, and we talked about kind of how this would look. And we mentioned back three versus back five. It looked like a back three a lot of the night, where with Duncan and Marcanic pushing higher up into the midfield. And that kind of left Diaz, Romero, and Dugan on kind of an island by themselves. And they handled the task of shutting down a potentially at times dangerous Galaxy attack. And Joao Klaus coming into the match, 5 games, 5 goals, and I don't really remember calling his name much on the night. Him and Duggan had some fantastic battles throughout that evening.
They did. Duggan was outstanding. He was, I thought, world class in terms of just his composure and 1v1 defending and moving the ball. But you're right. Diaz and Romero really had really good games too. And I really liked when it was 2-1 and now it got desperate. They got desperate. Again, I think the Galaxy was desperate for points that game, given where they are in the standings. So I thought we started to block balls, slide. I remember one time Duncan on the far post just got into the right space and then just was there to clear the ball. You know, after Anthony gave everything, Chandler, young kid, comes in against Peck. But we didn't leave him on an island. You know,
not just Peck. When Padelford and Chandler came on, the Galaxy kind of put, it seemed at times, Royce and Peck over there trying to overload that side.
Yeah, that's
and those guys were just like, oh man, that's a lot of experience and a lot of talent that they're going up against, and they've mostly held their ground.
They really held their ground. I mean, it wasn't individual, it was collective. You know, like you said, there was Devin and Carolyn for a 1v2. If Peck was going to really try to run by, maybe if you get by Chandler, Devin's there. You know, I really like Chandler's kind of possession in key moments late in the game as well. He had a great spin turn and switch that kept the ball at a key point for us. So, again, it was a really great collective team effort of the guys who started the game and the group that was in there to kind of battle those last 10 or 15 minutes. It was nice to see Bongi coming in hungry to defend well, which I thought he really did. I thought he really created some good kind of shape and organization for us. So, you know, it's just, like I said, it was one of those days where I can't think of individual collective groups that weren't really good for us to get that result. And I thought it was one of Drake's most composed games as a goalie. You know, his last 15 minutes of just grabbing balls out of the air when things got chaotic. And he did it in such a nonchalant way. There's a lot of hard corner kicks that, you know, some goalies don't. He made it look really easy. You know, he made it look like, yeah, we're going to win this game. Let's just make sure we keep our shape. So
yeah, absolutely. That was an exceptional performance. It was a really fun one to watch, and it's a good way or thing to build off of, a good game to build off of heading into this weekend's game. Another 9:30 kickoff for the Loons out in San Diego, a place that they got a 3-1 win last year in the regular season. Unfortunately, the season ended in the playoffs, a 1-0 loss. Closely fought game there in San Diego in the Western Conference semifinals. How do we see this building and growing? What we saw last week against the Galaxy, how do we see what's the step for Minnesota United to continue growing upon that?
Yeah, I mean, I hope we get excited about how we played on the road, and we're going to be playing a better team. There's no doubt about it right now. I mean, again, the Galaxy could obviously grow into being a really good team, but I think that we should have some confidence about that. I'm personally excited about getting the win last weekend and seeing where we go this weekend, because after this weekend, we'll have 2 home games and 5 away. And I think that is huge. No, and if we can collect points this weekend, I think it's a really exciting last month for us going into the break, in terms of just, we are trying a lot of different things. You know, we're excited about hopefully getting James back, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in just a little bit. But ultimately for me this weekend, I think we look at how we played and we get excited about that mentality and maybe having even more hunger to play even better, because we're going to need to, because San Diego's a better team. But I think there's a route to do it that's not just based on completely defending for 90 minutes. And I think that, you know, Duo will be out. He got a red card against San Jose.
That's a big loss for them.
Yeah, big loss. And so I think there's an opportunity to kind of, you know, about to absorb a little bit more pressure, but I think there's an opportunity for us to keep that line high and move the ball and hurt San Diego a little bit too.
Yeah. And let's talk about, you mentioned James Rodriguez there. Club issued a statement yesterday, Tuesday, as of the time of recording, that He was in the hospital for severe dehydration, now out of the hospital, now going through a protocol to get back on the field. We saw those pictures of him training with the club the other day. Where, I guess, from inside the building, from you, where does he stand? How has he been progressing this week as we gear up for a tough game in San Diego?
Yeah, I think first, certainly, like it's always scary, and somebody has
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
spend time in a hospital, and I'm sure there's a lot of tests and uncertainty about exactly what's going on, but ultimately, it's exciting when you're in it internally, and then somebody's on the training field. I love that because that means that there's a progression where they're getting better. Where it's a little bit of Groundhog Day for me. I felt like there was this buildup to get Hamas on the field prior to the Nashville game, and then there was that knock, and it just kind of set back like how do we integrate and grow? And then you had this buildup, and you had the great momentum in Seattle, and then you have the international break where he's got two big games where he played a lot of minutes and contributed to their losses, but both those games, if you watched them, they had Croatia where they should have been up, and then ultimately Croatia kind of got the lead, and that kind of ended Thomas's minutes in the second half. Similar to France. I mean, they probably should have scored the first two goals against France for those first 25, 30 minutes. If you don't score your goals against France, you're going to lose because they're that good. But he had significant minutes, and then you're excited for him to come back and now use that to kind of build into where we were heading, whether it was the Galaxy and now San Diego. And then you have the medical setback. So it's really tough to figure out how that integration is going to happen now. But first and foremost, we just want him to get healthy and feel like he's ready. And then people like me can get excited about how does that integration happen. I feel like I'm excited about it because what I saw in Seattle and where we are defensively, what we're doing, man, it gets me excited for these last 5 or 6 games, particularly at Allianz Field. There's no doubt. I think it'll be a fun, exciting spring of soccer coming up here.
Yeah, and especially if you can get him and integrate him into the system that we saw in the second half against the Galaxy, that would be really fun to see, considering, as you mentioned, the 41 minutes that we have seen of him so far, he's been, in fact, impactful. He's had some really good passes that I don't think a couple of the players were ready or expecting because of his skill and talent on the field and what he sees. But if you can get a team kind of gelling around that and expecting those passes, man, that can be a really fun attack to look at and watch as they progress over what's it now, 9 league games, 10 games overall, before or in the next 46 or so days before the World Cup break. It's a lot of games in a short amount of time. It's going to be a sprint to the World Cup break. But let's continue talking about this San Diego game. As we know, as we've seen San Diego over the past year and a half, a little bit over a year, they play really fluid forward passing soccer, and they are fun to watch. They love to have possession. We talked about the defensive performance last week against the Galaxy. What's the key for that back line this week for Minnesota to shutting down San Diego without, kind of planning on them getting a red card, because that's what they seem to do at this point. But how do you defend against this San Diego team?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts and ends with Dreyer. Obviously, I think outside of Messi, the most points in the league and just an unbelievable player. And I also think it starts and ends with us giving a lot of respect to a new club in MLS who's done a great job. Their front office, their team has been outstanding. They're balanced. They try to play in a way that unsettles teams and really, is ball possession oriented. In a way that I think you got to give them credit. They've done a really good job of building a really good team. And I feel like, Dreyer is such a key piece of how once they break lines, get the ball to him in really dangerous spots. And he's very efficient. If it's an opportunity for him to go to goal, he goes. If it's not, he'll find the pass. So I think he's done a great job of really being the kind of their offensive juggernaut on assists and goals. But then you've got to look at the midfield, and I think it's Turchkov who's really, really taken the league by storm in terms of a 6/8 position where he's like, I'm holding and locking this down. So it's just a really good team. It's a team that I think has felt a little bit of uncertainty the last 2 weeks based on getting knocked out of CONCACAF champions in a tough way, given that they had a great first game. They couldn't go down to Mexico and finish it off. And then this last weekend against San Jose, although it's an unfair result because they got the red card in the 30th minute, and we're down 3-0 at halftime. So, but it's still a result they didn't have last year.
Yeah.
So there's a reality that there's also in a little bit of a moment of where are we going? Where 3 weeks ago, I think they would have been very easy to say, LAFC, Vancouver, San Diego. We just had Matt on, and Matt wasn't quite sure he wants to put San Diego in that box now, and that's maybe a little bit unfair given how well they've done in the last year and a half. But if you got one of our bigger pundits nationally, questioning San Diego, there might be some internal kind of subconscious questioning going on within their group as well.
You mentioned the midfield, and that what we saw last week kind of leads to a question of what does the Loons midfield look like after Owen Jen put in a stellar performance in place of Will Trapp, who was sick. Will Trapp presumably healthy. We saw him on the practice field this week, at least pictures. What does that midfield look like for you now? Do you keep handing minutes or handing starts to Owen Jen, or does he go back to coming off the bench in late in matches and key moments?
Well, I think certainly you've got some choices to make based on how well we played last week, but I would probably flip it, and Cam also has to think about 2 games in 3 days.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be staying out, and we go to Sacramento when we play in our Open Cup game, an incredibly hard first round opponent. There's no doubt. You're talking about one of the tougher places of second division soccer in this country. Great pride. Obviously they made a run to the final years ago, and it's a very tough place to play. So I think Cam's got to think about this game and a little bit about like how do I want to manage Tuesday as well. And so that might come into play one way or another, and how he thinks about which guys he wants to put back in or not. So I'm just happy that he's got a little bit of tough decisions based on how well guys have played individually, because that's what you want. You want the coach to have the challenges based on, not 9 to 11 guys, but 16 to 18 guys pushing the coaches about who should be starting what games.
Yeah, I think that I completely forgot about the Open Cup game. I know it's on the rundown. I was going to talk about it next, but when I asked that question, completely forgot about it. One last question before we do actually fully segue into that game. What's the key to feeding Yeboah this week? Because we know, as you mentioned already as well, that midfield, the San Diego midfield's really good, closing down opportunities. We know their defense is really good. They'll be without Manny Doyle, who's been exceptional since coming in last season. What's the key to keep providing Yeboah with good chances at the top?
Yeah, I really do think it means that we got to win the midfield battle a bit more. We got to let Turskov know it's not going to be an easy day. We're going to move the ball. I think the ability to get our wingbacks high so Yeboah can get excited about being part of winning that midfield, then getting it wide and getting the box. I think the picture of that second goal is where we want Kelvin. We want him involved in how we do the buildup. But once that ball gets wide, we want numbers. We want numbers in the box. We want to unsettle them. So to me, it's that hunger for him to kind of do the little things, which I think Matt kind of talked about. He seems to be really hungry to do more of the little things this year, but then finish it off by getting in the box. And again, it doesn't always have to be the one who scores. Again, I'm still a huge fan of that forward, making sometimes those near post runs and a late, Triantis comes late, or or we have it's maybe Duncan arriving at the far post. So all those things that are important for me that lead up to Kelvin kind of getting the space to do it, massively important that the guys get excited about it. If we're going forward, let's throw the numbers forward. Let's finish off plays the right way so we keep our shape defensively. But then now Kelvin is that beastly forward who's in that box, always putting pressure on, frankly, a young back line at the end of the day. A back line that I think has played outstanding, but are still growing into their professional career about week in and week out about how they're going to deal with top end forwards.
Yeah. All right. Let's jump ahead. U.S. Open Cup, a game will be played before we're back here recording again at Sacramento Republic in the round of 32. One of the tougher draws for an away MLS team. 8 points from 5 games so far this season in the USL Western Conference. They have experience making runs in this tournament. The U.S. Open Cup is always one of my favorite tournaments every year. You mentioned kind of thinking about having to think about what you want to do with that lineup. So who do you want to see get opportunities on Tuesday against Sacramento Republic?
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion, and again, I love our fan base because I think they really get the challenges of playing in the Open Cup against high level second division competition. And it's even more unique because I think historically we've actually played a third division team to start.
Yeah.
You almost kind of get some of your younger guys who are doing really well in MLS prepared for second division men.
Yeah.
And that's what Sacramento is going to be when you play the third division. You almost get a game to kind of get guys' mindset into how hard Open Cup is, especially away. And how much like the battling of these games could be 120 minutes plus PKs, and there tends to be red card drama in these one and done kind of games. So I'm excited to see where Cam goes with the travel group and who he decides. Obviously, I think Kieran Chandler has a good shot of getting some real minutes based on him coming into the Galaxy game. Like you mentioned, Owen Jean has got the legs to maybe play in both games. And really he's at an age where he probably could play 2 games in 3 days. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting kind of process where Cam's got to take it one game at a time. There's no doubt. Getting points this weekend for me is huge for us.
Mm-hmm.
Again, 5 away games, heading back home next week in Portland, and getting points this weekend would be massive, massive. So, and then the midweek, I'm not sure who else I'm like 100% I want to see play, but I think we've got a lot of guys chomping at the bit to get minutes, and Cam's got to figure out that balance to make sure we're competitive and giving guys opportunities.
Yeah, it's this time of year when you have these games already early. It feels like early in the season where you have these extra games in a different competition. It was always fun to watch how teams adjust. And yeah, considering that it is a USL championship side.
I mean, Jonathan, sorry to obviously you look at Bongi's probably going to get minutes because he's probably more than likely won't start this weekend. DJ Taylor is in that kind of mix.
Fitz. I know there's a lot of fans chomping at the bit to see him. Is this an opportunity to see him on the field and get some valuable minutes?
Yep, 100%. Yeah,
I
agree.
I think it'll be interesting to see what they do, as you said, considering that the level of play that they are going up against in Sacramento Public. We saw it last year against Louisville City, another USL team that they went up against early on in the tournament. They did heavily rotate that week and got the win, a 1-0 win last year. So I think for me, it's always important. You have a chance to win a trophy. You absolutely go out and try and win that trophy, but you also have to keep in mind that league play is also incredibly important as well, especially early on the season when you're battling for every point possible early on in the season. And with the Western Conference looking a little bit deeper than I think many projected maybe coming into the season, getting every single point as quick as you can is going to be even more important. So it's
100% agree with that. West has thrown the gauntlet down for sure.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Salt Lake and San Diego or not San Diego, San Jose and Dallas kind of emerging, as well as Colorado, emerging into really tough teams.
Well, again, I don't want to always. I think we have a better start than a lot of the pundits thought too. So, Matt was just on the show. I wouldn't put him on the spot, but I will now say I don't think Matt thought we'd be where we are right now.
I think that's fair. I don't think many people did, considering the amount of changes, the amount of important pieces you lost in the offseason, a coaching change, and talking about tactical evolution, moving away from the defensive approach that they had last year. I think it's fair to say that not many people expected the Loons to be where they are, considering the difficulty of their schedule.
That's why I bring up. Sometimes you and I ignore it, but we should be like, we're part of that strength of the West that has looked really good so far.
Yeah, you're only 1 point behind Colorado. You're a couple points above Houston, who have played well at times this season. Austin have played well. They got a 0-0 draw at Miami's new stadium, conveniently named new stadium. So yeah, this is going to be a fun week for Minnesota United. We'll have plenty to discuss next week coming up on the show with a special guest. We'll figure out who that is in the time being. But Manny, good stuff from you. I'm looking forward to this game coming up Saturday, 9:30 p.m. kickoff. Minnesota United at San Diego FC. Broadcast on Apple TV starts at 9:30. Pre-match show with Dan Terra and myself on the radio side starts at 9 o'clock on 1500 ESPN and the Score North mobile app. And then it's a quick turnaround Tuesday up at Sacramento Republic, taking them on in the U.S. Open Cup round of 32. That game is at 9 p.m. If I'm looking at my schedule correctly. 9 p.m. I don't remember. Is it still on CBS this year? I'm forgetting.
That is a great question. I'm not sure, but it's easy to find though. They're always on CBS.
The club will make it easy to find. The league will make it easy to find.
They tend to be on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
They tend to be
the
on
early rounds too. Yeah.
The early rounds. I'm not. Either way, watch it. You should be able to watch it. Great late night soccer midweek.
Yeah. Who doesn't like a 9 p.m. game on a Tuesday night on a school night?
Wait, I watched last night. LAFC Cruz Azul. Yeah, same thing.
I love the late night games.
Yeah.
I know Dan's not a fan of them because they're super late, but they
Dan's
just always bring chaos.
Dan's a little older.
They always bring chaos, and we saw that last week. MLS After Dark is super fun. Looking forward to this. Manny, good stuff from you. We'll talk to you next week.
Awesome.
Production staff, thank you so much to Grace Stearson, Kyle Hayward, Evan Entler for putting this on every week, and Loons fans, we'll talk to you next week.